The impression I get, and I could be wrong, is that a lot of young people spend too much time thinking about what they are going to do next. And in the process, they forget to do what they are responsible for now. So my advice to you is that the best way to manage your career is to excel at the responsibilities you've been given presently. That is your best recommendation. Don't spend your time dreaming about tomorrow and forget to do what you've been asked to do presently. When you perform well in your current job, the world is watching, opportunities will open up. If you spend your time dreaming about tomorrow and neglect the duties you are responsible for today, what you will observe is that you don't know what you're doing. So that's advice for nothing. Now, Trevor asked me to talk about creating the good society and the role of business and citizens. That is a very small component of what I'm going to say because it's an opinion, it's almost prescriptive. I'll literally skip over that very quickly, and then I'll share with you the concerns that I have as I observe the life around me, if I observe the reality as opposed to the ideals, and ideas are kind of dreams. But I'm always contrasting the things that we theorize about, the things that we claim to do, and then observe what we do, as opposed to what we claim we want to do. Today, there is the conflict in Israel, in the Middle East. And I cannot escape trying to put that into context in the way I grew up, the way I was brought up from a global perspective, not from my mother's perspective, but globally. Yes, the first 7 years, I was a son in a family. After that, I was a citizen, essentially, of the world. And I was given another rubric, another value system. I went to church, I became a Christian, and I was given yet another rubric. And these are things I carry to try and make sense of the world I live in today. I try to make sense of what is going on in Israel and Palestine with the backdrop of this context of how I was brought up, and I struggle. So I'll mention, almost like I said in passing, what I think about how to create a good society. Then I will spend some time sharing with you the things that I'm struggling with, the things that I've got no answers to be honest with you. I don't pretend to have answers, but I would like to share the challenges that I see with you. So let's start with a good society. A good society, I think, is very easy to prescribe. I think it's a society, sadly, it tends to be a closed society. I say sadly because our challenges are not a closed society. Our challenges are a bigger society, either country level, regional level, or global level. That's where we are really struggling. In my family, it's very easy. I know how to relate to my brothers, sisters, and my parents. It's almost intuitive. But when I get out of my family and start relating to other families, and start relating to foreigners, start relating to other citizens of different countries, all of a sudden there are lots of friction points, which I cannot easily put into context in terms of the frameworks that we've been given. But if we look at a closed society, what are the guidelines that we should use to create a good society? Law and order, I think, is one of them. It's a rules-based society. In other words, I need to have predictability of actions and reactions and consequences of actions. And that must be very explicit. It's like forming a club. If we in this room came together and formed a club, we would very quickly draft a constitution, then we would elect a committee from amongst ourselves, people who will administer the rules that we ourselves have formed, which are very clear, transparent, but we would have simplicity because we own the club. We are the owners of the club. The rules are ours. And the people in administration, the committee we select, is a committee that clearly understands they don't own the club, we own the club. And they are administering on our behalf. So that's the simplest unit I can think of in terms of you go from family to a club, but I think it gives us the guidelines of what a properly functioning society should be like. We all have to articulate rules that will guide our relationships to each other. We then normally will have people we select who administer those rules on our behalf. And when it's like that and clearly understood, those people are not above us. They, in many ways, are serving this community because either they volunteer or we've asked them to do it, right? So, rules-based. You cannot have a society that is not rules-based. You then need law and order. What does that mean? It simply means there has to be mechanisms, conflict where human beings exist. Even in a family, there will be conflicts from time to time. So law and order tends to lay out what happens when there is conflict. How do you resolve those conflicts? How do you deal with situations where a member of the community is wronged by somebody else? How are those things decided and resolved? That's, again, very straightforward. It's not complicated in my view. I think below that, I would like to say, at a personal level, if I was running a country, what would I put in place? Firstly, I would not want a nanny state. And what I mean by that, I would not want the government to do things for people. I would like people to run their lives themselves. But how do you get to a point where your citizens are given the tools to run their lives? I think education would be pivotal. You would have to put education which gives the citizens the tools with which they can then run their own lives. I think that's pivotal. I think infrastructure is a public good. I would have to put in infrastructure across the board, whether it's transportation, communication, water and sanitation, all of these things then allow the citizens to run their lives themselves. But we all know that in any society, there will always be different levels of prosperity or different levels of talents. If you belong to a society and you happen to be at the bottom of that society, for whatever reason, the society has to offer to you something that still makes you feel you belong to the society. And hence the concept of safety net. A safety net to leave nobody behind. You need to find a mechanism for people who are less fortunate than others, not to be incentivized to destroy the system because it does nothing for them. Yeah? If you don't do that, a society that those members who feel that the society does not offer them anything either will revolt against the society or they break off and go and form their own society. That's where these things come from. Because you've made me feel that I don't belong. Therefore, what am I doing in this place? If I don't belong, I go somewhere else, I rebel and overthrow you, or I split off and go and form another breakaway society. So you have to find a mechanism for everybody to feel there is a good reason for them to belong to this society. I think for me, in short, literally, that's what I would say you go about forming a sensible, working, functional, to use Trevor's word, good society. A society that is structured in such a way that conflicts can be resolved and there is apparent fairness in the way that resolution is done, and nobody's loading it over other people, and the rules that society owns and put in place are followed. There's compliance with the rules by everybody, without exception. Okay? So let me leave it at that. Now, I want now to stray into the spaces that I struggle with. Because I think what we agree with and what we conceptualize is easy. But when we look at the reality of how we conduct our lives, I think it gets a bit more challenging. So let me start by what I call the evolution of society. And that's why I asked for this flip chart. And I invite you to feel free to come stand where you can see what I'm going to draw here. Please, relax and feel free. So, if I call this 0 point primitive man, and I imagine the evolution of society, all of us, for reasons I cannot articulate, we have moved away from the strongest gorilla sleeps where he likes, absolutely. We try to moderate our relationships to make them much more accommodating of each other. And I don't think that anybody can actually tell you why that process is taking place, but it is. Oh, he's moved it to somewhere else. So if this is evolution, and this is time, and this is supposed to be a perfect society, which no society is as of today, each society has followed its own path towards that line, and will never touch that line. In mathematics, they call that approaching it asymptotically. It will never, the two lines will never touch, yeah? Different societies, however, are on different paths. So if I take time now, here, it crosses these points at these different points. And I'm going to use the vocabulary that we have because I'm not going to create another one today, but understand it in that context. The societies that are up here are supposed to be more evolved or more developed. So they've traveled a journey to get where they are today. This society here is less developed. If, however, I draw another line parallel to this but lower, which crosses all these, I get other interesting points along the way. These points tell you that each society has passed at some given point in time through very similar circumstances. So if I take this country here, which has traveled this journey, as being the least developed, where it is today, all the countries that are supposedly more developed than it were at one point in the past in exactly the same circumstances as it has. Is that clear? One of the challenges we have today is that these societies try to dictate to this society to operate as if it is here. Now, where each society is a result of the journey that it has traveled, not somebody else's journey. This society is here through the experiences it has gone through. This society is here because of the experiences it has gone through. This society, therefore, cannot possibly be forced to be here because it has not traveled this journey. We are failing as a global society to deal with this issue. And you need to also understand that people who are here, the leadership that is here, will often push back for bad reasons because they want to protect bad behavior. But I would also argue that this society, the best it should do is to say, we can share with you our experiences as we've traveled our journey, what we experienced, what we did, so that you can see what is applicable to you in order to then accelerate. So what then happens, if you take lessons from these, your trajectory will not continue on this line. It will then go something like this. You then accelerate because you are taking advantage of the experiences of those who are more advanced than where you are. But this conversation does not go like that. It's not a question of we'll share with you what we've gone through. It's we are forcing you to be here as if you've traveled our journey. Big problem. Yeah? But that is not a conversation that is being entertained today, and it challenges me. But I also recognize, like I said, our leaders will often hide although they will not conceptualize the way I've just done here, they'll say, oh no, this is not appropriate for us because, but then they actually try to sustain bad behavior by hiding behind this issue, as opposed to saying, we are open to learn from what others have acquired, the knowledge they've acquired, the experiences, and accelerate our journey onwards. So that's one thing, okay? Now, the other thing is the concept of the nation state. So there is a Zimbabwe, which you all and I belong to. I ran for election in this country. If you had elected me, my responsibility would have been to look after and be accountable to Zimbabweans, not Zambians, not Malawians, not South Africans. In the nature of animals, part of which we are, we've got a very delicate balance between compete and cooperate. Very delicate balance between compete and cooperate. I will cooperate with you if I can see that there will be a win-win. There will be advantages to both sides. If my approach towards you is such that there is nothing in it for you and is everything for me, you're going to compete with me. You're not going to cooperate with me. But the very architecture of the nation state, where there is a Zambia and there is a Zimbabwe, says that my first responsibility is to look after Zimbabweans and not after Zambians. What does that actually mean in practice? How do we, at the same time, create a global architecture of accountability when our unit of account, to use an accounting term, the unit of account in terms of global behavior for human beings is the nation state? We attempted to form the UN. I say attempted, although it exists today, it's dysfunctional. In many ways, it was dysfunctional from day one. Why was it dysfunctional from day one? Because it was formed on a class structure. The winners of the day created the UN with a General Assembly and a Security Council. In other words, there was a junior chamber and a senior chamber. The senior chamber made laws which said we can operate and exclude ourselves from the rules. You can make any decision you like. We've got a right to veto your decisions as a majority from day one. So, baked into the architecture of the UN at formation stage was the concept of the biggest gorilla sleeps where he lies. I am not making that statement as a judgment issue. I'm making it as an observation of fact. Because one of the struggles I have is whether we are right in treating ourselves as being better than the rest of the animal kingdom. When I observe our behavior, I don't see much difference. In many ways, actually, I see the rest of the animal kingdom being superior to us in the way it relates to the rest of the universe. We are the only animal, in my opinion, that has degraded the quality of the universe within which we are meant to exist. Its ability to sustain life, to sustain us, we are the only species that is doing everything to degrade it. No other species does what we do. And so when we claim this superiority over the rest of the animals, rather than actually learn from them, learn the way they balance their activities. In fact, maybe let me go away from there. Let's take, if we go back to this graph, or this picture, if you like, the more primitive a people are, actually the more they are able to live in harmony with, the more they appear to me to be able to live in harmony with the rest of the universe. The more advanced we claim to be, the more removed we are from being able to live with the rest of the universe and universal laws and so on and so on. Okay? And it is a puzzle, and I don't know whether we sit down and actually ask why this is so. And some of the very basic issues. when there is a disaster about to strike, earthquake, tsunami, all of these kind of things, the rest of the animal kingdom is so attuned to something within the system that they sense it coming and they take the necessary precautions. Animals run to higher ground, away from low ground when there is a tsunami. Animals live in an area where there's going to be an earthquake when it's going to happen. We have lost the ability to communicate at that level with the rest of the universe. Why is that? Do we ever ask ourselves why that is the case? Now, let me try to use what I suspect, if we really understood, it might just give us the key to the puzzle. So I've got a PhD in physics, and I thought I was very smart, okay, at the time I got this PhD. Now, if I were to go back to my college and tell them my struggles with some things that we thought were very fundamental, I think they might just withdraw the PhD, okay? So it's an interesting issue. So the concept of balance is supposed to be very simple. Balance, equilibrium. You go through college and you think, oh, I've mastered this, I've understood this, I know what it means. But when we say things are in balance, there is a coexistence of opposites. Coexistence of opposites. And that's the only way balance can happen. There is no other way balance can happen. In other words, it's end. We have developed a language which says in balance, it's a coexistence of positive and negative. Part of our problem is the language we have developed, right? Positive and negative. In our lives, we are socialized to try and maximize anything we call positive and try to minimize anything we call negative. But the concept of balance appears to suggest to me that actually we should be trying to look at this very differently. Accept the coexistence of positive and negative forces in order to get a situation that can sustain life because it is in balance. Yeah? But the language we use, the analogies we use are saying to us either or. And I think Eastern philosophies are closer to this end. Western philosophies are much more either or kind of structured. And when you think about it, when you say somebody is bad and somebody is good, and I was saying to Trevor the other day that I'm less religious or less explicitly religious than he is. I'm spiritual, but not religious. I say I'm spiritual because I believe there's a creator. I cannot escape that. The universe is much too perfectly engineered to be an accident for me. So I'm spiritual. But when you say somebody is good and somebody is bad, when you look at the world, most people have been killed today factually through strife of belief systems. But yet, when you believe in a creative force, all of these elements of the universe, what we have labeled good and bad, were created by the same creative force. What does that tell us? Have we interpreted correctly what is good and what is bad? Or should we have rather used opposites? The label of opposite does not say something is better than the other. It simply says they are different and they operate in opposite directions. That's all it says. It does not attribute value of good and bad. Now, if these things were created virtually in equal measure because of the equilibrium by the same creative force, what do we learn from this? What should we learn from it? I'm sorry that I'm asking questions to which I've got no answers. But I also want you to understand, actually, I think the universe is not as simple as we are making it out to be. It is not. And I think what you need to be is be curious. Be curious, continue to give each other permission to seek answers as opposed to pretending that we've got answers, because we don't have answers. Let's be curious, let's keep pushing, let's keep helping each other to explore. And maybe one day, maybe, I doubt it, but maybe one day we'll get a grasp of the algorithm, to use today's lingo, about technology. Because there is a master plan, there is an algorithm that my inclination is to believe that we'll never understand. And I think part of our challenge as human beings is that we are trying to be co-creators. We are trying to almost like be partners with this creative force by thinking that we can tinker around and remake the world the way we want. I don't think we can. And I think if we adjusted to that reality, our behaviors might just change and create a much more sustainable relationship with our environment, with the rest of the universe and the rest of the elements in that universe. Let me leave it at that. Thank you.
So, the universe has an inherent property which is called entropy, whereby we have processes that are moving from a position of order to disorder. And there's an argument that's consistently made, and I think you also made it, that humanity and mankind sort of has this destructive nature. I would like to push back on that because, first of all, I do not believe that mankind actually has the capacity to make a significant change in the universe, let alone our solar system or planet whatsoever. When you look at how old this planet has been, it's over 4 billion years old, and it has gone through some of the worst catastrophes you can imagine. We have been having an industrial revolution for, about 200 years or so. And in that time, indeed, we have made, drastic changes to the environment. But when you look at the quality of life for most people, things are generally better. We live much longer. Children are no longer dying in their infancy. We get to interact with our communities much better. Our ancestors were not much better than us, even in terms of their civility. If you look at the wars that Shaka would do, we were not much better back then than we are now. In fact, I think this is the longest period of prosperity. However, I do submit that because of the technology we have, bad news seems to spread much more than good news because it is more visible. So we know about the war in Gaza, we know what's going on in Ukraine, but we are not hearing much about some of the good developments that are happening on a day-to-day basis. So my question really is, do you believe that perhaps there is a bias when it comes to the outlook of our current civilization and the trajectory that's going, which is kind of being fueled by this influx of information, sort of this information overdose, which makes us have this pessimistic view to say, us as humanity are on a trajectory which is a net negative for our planet, when in reality, we have made extreme strides to enhance quality of life, enhance our environment. Even when you look at that chart, I would also argue that there's a layer above that we don't see yet, whereby we develop the technologies to clean up our environment. We develop nanotechnology to ensure that we are able to fix some of the problems. We're not yet there, maybe it's 100, 200 years from now. But clearly the trajectory we're going is showing us that it's possible that one day we might be able to reverse some of these issues.
Thank you, Victor. Nkosana, do you want to respond?
Yeah, sure. Victor, your observation is in one part, I think, very accurate. And that is what we do as human beings. I think, and again, one has to qualify, both you and I think, it's an opinion. I would agree that I don't think it's going to make a major difference to how the universe itself as a whole functions. But I have to say that I think we could make ourselves extinct. Our debate here is not so much to do with our behavior versus the universe, but our behavior and the impact on humanity and our relationships with each other. We continuously develop tools that have got the capacity to do amazing harm, yes, to the universe, but I think the universe engineering is so perfectly done that nothing we throw at it is going to make a difference. But will it not make a difference to our ability to exist in the environment that we continuously are attacking? I reckon that if you want to go biblical, I think that the end of the world, it's not the end of the world, it's end of humanity. I think we've got a real risk that will make ourselves extinct. But the universe will go on, absolutely, no question.
With or without us?
With or without us. And the likelihood, I think, on the trajectory we are on, it will be without us.
Wow. Isn't this is the beauty of coming to Nyanga Ideas Festival, to deal with this heavy lifting stuff. I mean, I can see everybody's like, yes, you haven't spoken in a while. Again, just remind us of your name and ask your questions.
My name is Trevor Ncube.
Yeah, Ncube.
I'm very interested, especially when it comes to the issues of nature and humans. If you go to the wildlife, I think you are being told to say, don't disturb the nature. When the lion kills an animal, it's not being disturbed. That's why it understands its nature without a disturbance. But it comes to us as human beings. As you say, that you want to improve something that we don't know. Why we improve it? What is the result? Because the ecosystem of nature, it will give its own challenges. As much as you solve them, the other challenge will come again. So, as much as we are coming to vaccinate and do all those things to try and prevent the nature to take its course, we are economizing, or we are making business out of the nature of us, and then we can head to extinct through that. Thank you.
Do you want to respond to that comment?
Well, again, I agree with the observation. It's fascinating. So let me put it slightly differently, but in my own kind of framework. When you go to a national park and you see a lion killing a gazelle, an impala, whatever, kind of intuitively you sort of say, that's the food chain, that's the way it's supposed to be. And the rest of the universe in many ways is organized exactly the same way. Life and this issue of other animals feed on animals, and we take it as a given. Our problem always arises when it comes to human beings, always. So if you go to a game park and you see a pride of lion hunting and being very strategic, some going to chase the animals and others hiding waiting in ambush, you marvel at the smartness. So here I'm going to almost pose a question against the whole issue of ethics and anti-corruption and so on and so on. If I say what the lion is doing is just hunting, and the tactics and strategies it employs are those for survival and increasing the possibility of success. Again, when it comes to human beings, when I outsmart you, you say, Nkosana, you've cheated me. you understand that we have applied and understand that all these frameworks are man-made frameworks. They're all man-made. But we somehow have distanced ourselves from how the rest of the universe operates. We've attempted to apply a different rule book. But when you observe what is actually going on, we are failing dismally to uphold the frameworks that we claim to have put in place. But we don't ask questions. We don't say, but why is it? As a scientist, I'm automatically wired to do that. If I set out to do something, and I've done a hypothesis that this is likely to go this way because of these things, if it doesn't happen, I go back to question my hypothesis. But as human beings, we continuously fail. We then don't go back to ask, is the framework we've put in place correct? We don't do that. We just continue happily to insist that it is correct, even as the evidence shows us that we are failing to uphold it.
I love having time with Nkosana, and he knows I say he's difficult because I give him a title to talk on, and I'm sure you saw what he did, eh? That's Nkosana for you, eh? He's got a beautiful mind. He thinks in a way that I don't think, and the way that we don't think, and that kind of stuff. Nkosana, you say we should be curious. We are not curious. I want to ask you two questions. Don't be difficult. Answer my questions. I want to ask you two questions. How is it like being you with this curious mind? How do you exist among us who are not curious, who tend to settle for the easy and don't question life as we go along throughout the day? It must be difficult dealing with us.
Trevor, you are asking a question which, if I may say so, is a bit meaningless because...
You see? Anyway, yeah. That's the beauty, yeah.
Because I don't know what it's like not to be me. You understand?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm me, and I don't see...
Okay, so how you're you. What is it like interacting with us? And we're coming across to you as we're not curious, we are shallow, we are we embrace things without questioning them. You just be honest, be candid. What is it like?
But you see, I wouldn't use the words you use. I think I would agree that most human beings, sadly, are not curious. Would I call them shallow? No, I wouldn't say that. But I constantly try to be quite careful because I embrace the fact that the way I see the world is not the same way that Trevor sees the world. And I try to discipline my mind to try and always understand how Trevor sees the world. In spite of my curiosity, I don't dismiss how you see the world.
And because you have taken us to that space, do you think of death? And when you do, given all this curiosity and the questions that you have about humanity and the universe, your spiritual and so forth, what's your space, mental space, when you think of death?
So I'm going to answer this by telling you a little bit about my journey, my personal journey. Both my parents are late. My father died before my mother. My mother died about 20 years after my father died. After my father died, I had not really engaged with the afterlife or after death issues significantly. I had, but not significantly. But after my father died, he, on several times, visited, happened to be in my dreams. And what was fascinating for me was that each time he was warning me about an incident which would happen within a week. So I kind of lived through this, but the most fascinating bit was after my mother died, about 8 months after my mother died, I had a dream, and my daughter says it's an apparition. I don't know what the difference is. So I had a dream where my father appears in my dream, dressed very smartly, very happy with himself, and he says to me, "I've just come to tell you that your mother has arrived." Wow. So these experiences have impacted me on what I think about afterlife. I consider death as just a transition. There is an afterlife, and this is, I think, my personal experience is evidence that there is. Not from a Christian point of view or any of those. Personal experience tells me there is an afterlife. But my difficult self, as you put it, still has to question whether...
You see now?
No, but you have to listen because I think you will see sense.
Absolutely.
So when you look at the rest of the universe, new life always comes after the death or a transition of some sort, whether it's a seed or whatever. But what is also true is that not every seed leads to a new life. Not every seed leads to a new life. So could that also then imply that although there is a life after death, we should not universalize it? Maybe some people go through, and maybe some people just perish and stop. That's a question that automatically occurs to me.
So fascinating. You say you are not religious, but yeah, I see the questions. You say you are not religious, but you are spiritual. How do you live that spirituality? Do you worship? Do you pray? I'm trying to ask a question. I hope I've done so.
Yeah. No. I think I think I've understood your question. I don't believe in going to a church. I believe there is a creator, creative force as I call it. I believe I'm a product of that. But I also believe that my relationship with that creative force is totally private. It does not have to be public. I don't believe, what do people call it? When you go to church, part of it is...
Praising and worshiping?
No. When you guys go get together, what do you call it?
Fellowship.
Fellowship.
Yeah.
I don't believe in that. I think my relationship with my creator is a personal thing, and I don't have to be in a crowd with somebody else. When I talk to my father or my mother, when they were alive, I didn't need an audience to do that. Did I?
No. Okay. Dr. Olivia Mchena. Fascinating conversation, isn't it? Yeah. Over to you, Ma'am.
I want to go back to what Ken said about imagination, our creative capacity. And I find it difficult to equate God with or as a creative force. Right? I am created in God's image, in His likeness. And one of those is that creative capacity. So I cannot just stop at being curious. I need to go a step further and create. Whether I create a Dubai in Zimbabwe or a new political system, I have that creative capacity. And I think, let me dwell on that. Biblically, God at the Tower of Babel made a very, very, he's always significantly talking, a significant point. If these people can imagine and unite to do what they have done, nothing can stop them. And I believe that part of our problem is we are not, one, being creative, we are not uniting. What I take from your presentation to move me forward in the unity equation is your definition of imbalance. The coexistence of the positive and the negative and how they move, we can move forward. Allow me to share a very recent experience in Ghana.
You're going to be brief, eh?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I was asked to come to a church conference to talk about my book. I thought it was a very small church conference. Lo and behold, there were 5,000 delegates. 3 presidents, consecutive presidents of Ghana on the same platform with their supporters in the hall. The Speaker, the Chief Justice, the Council of Chiefs over there, they are not chiefs, they are called kings. What amazed me was the unity of purpose, trying to move Ghana forward. I thought Ghana was light years ahead of us in terms of political maturity, but they still wanted to they want to. So, how do we capture this imbalance, creative imagination force that we've been given to work out our differences and move forward? I just don't want to be curious. I want to be practically creative. Thank you.
Nkosana, do you want to respond?
There's nothing that you've said that I disagree with, actually. So I think we must continue. I think our challenge is not so much that I've not said anything implying we should not use our imagination, our curiosity to try to create different relationships, much more functional relationships. I think we should. What I'm pointing out, though, is that I would like us to also continue to push ourselves to try and explain the gap between what we say and what we do. And if we don't do that, I think there is something wrong. Now, I hope that you're going to also indulge me, because I'm going to say something that sometimes I think it's more prudent for me not to say, because people, I think, are very judgmental, and often they will draw the wrong conclusions from what the implication is. Firstly, let me ask you a question. How many of you know about the slave Bible? You know? Yes, how many know about the existence of the slave Bible? So 2 people.
You told me about it.
Yeah, so you now know, yeah, okay. There are 3 copies of the slave Bible, 2 in the United Kingdom and 1 in the United States. It's a Bible that was published in 1807, if I'm not mistaken, where sections of the Bible were rewritten to make them more appropriate at that time to be read by slaves, so that they would not rebel against their masters. The apartheid system in South Africa was supported on the basis of quoting the Bible. Okay? I'm just telling you that as a backdrop. I personally take the Bible as a novel, and I hope that I'm not annoying anybody, but I think the Bible is a novel. It was written by human beings at a given point in time, and when I say it's a novel, I'm not saying it's of no value. 2 different things. Novels are meant to teach us, almost in idiomatic form, a crystallization of the learnings from society, and somebody saying, I would like to teach, almost like ngano. When people tell you ngano, they are teaching you lessons that could be moral lessons, that could be strategic lessons. And in my opinion, the Bible is exactly the same. It was written with the intention of teaching us. I think the mistake we've made along the line is to attribute it to a divine origin as opposed to, and when you read sections like the disciples writing about the same event, they write it differently. It's fact. So if you take my view about the Bible, it's very valuable, but when you take it as a divine something handed down, it stops you being able to move the Bible into a time and place that is more appropriate, because it's cast in stone at a time that is now becoming relevant to us. But if you understand, it was written to give lessons, guidance at that given point in time, you then apply it in a discerning way, understanding that the circumstances have moved on, and therefore you continue with that document, but you make it more appropriate for this time and place. We've created something that is cast in stone in a time and place that has become irrelevant to us. And I think that's a mistake.
I'm going to ask Nick. I know you haven't lifted your hand. I want you to respond. And I want Ken, after Nick, to respond to that. Nick, are you ready to respond?
Fascinating discussion. I was not going to respond as yet, but probably let me just narrate a story. Somebody runs to me. By the way, I'm in the Bible. I walk with it, and I didn't go into it for lack of money, for trouble, or anything like that. I went into it by experience. Something happened. I was one of those people who, if you try to preach to me, you better be strong because I will convert you otherwise. But in the end, I was converted. So along the way, I discovered who I was or who I am, which I often don't share except to those who happen to know me. And I agree with Nkosana that the relationship between the Creator and oneself is really between you and two, but that relationship impacts everybody else. So one day somebody comes to me and says, look, help me, my sister is dead. And I didn't have money on me. So I said, look, I don't know how I can help you. And the guy insisted, please help me. And I was desperately trying to convince him that I don't have any money on me. I didn't know the guy. He just happened to come because I was the person closest. So I said, look, I don't know how to help you because I don't have any money. Maybe I can call somebody to try and assist you. But the guy was so desperate, a mature man, so desperate that I could see the desperation in his face. And I'm thinking, how do I help this guy? So I said, look, I will pray for you. And then he sort of calmed down. And I said, give me your right hand, because I wanted to pray for him holding his hand. And as he stretched his hand, the voice comes and says, Rosemary. So I look at him and I say to him, who is Rosemary? The guy says, he literally went down on his knees. That's my sister. My sister who is dead. And I said, okay, I'll pray for you. And again, as I try to, then the voice comes and says, call Rosemary to life. And I'm now, me too, I'm caught in between. I want to pray, and I'm getting this one. This is real. 3 times I'm resisting this. So I say, eventually I say to him, do you have somebody to phone right now? And he says, yes. My brother is there. He's the one who called me to tell me about Rosemary. So I said, call him now and tell him Rosemary shall live. The guy looks at me and he says, my sister is dead. And I said, call now. I was a different person. I said, call them now and tell them Rosemary shall live. The guy takes his phone. Phones, apparently this was in Mancheke, we were in Harare. So he takes his phone, calls the brother, and you could hear the commotion on the phone as they picked the phone. And he says, Rosemary shall live. He's talking on the phone. The brother says, listen, Rosemary is dead. And he's trying to say, Rosemary shall live. And there was confusion, obviously, because this doesn't make sense. And as he tried to push this, you could hear the people on the other side. The brother is trying to say, look, listen to me. Anyway, eventually I realized that this is going to be a hard thing for the Jew to understand each other. So I said, tell them, the prophet says, Rosemary shall live. So he says, no, this is real. If the guy comes here and tells you the story, I didn't know this guy. The guy said, listen, the prophet says, Rosemary shall live. And instantly, there was like huge shout the other side. And then it died down. And he cut the phone. And as soon as we finished that, I was standing by my car when it came. I got into the car and I drove off. I left him standing there. But it's a long story. We can maybe narrate it another time. And I drove off. But as I was driving off, somehow I looked in my rearview mirror. He was still packed in that same point. And I went. And from that moment, I couldn't go to the office. I was not I didn't go to the office. I went home. I was a completely different person. I went home. I didn't do anything that afternoon. In the evening, I remembered. And I called a friend. There's this guy who comes this, that, and that place. Do you have his contact? I left him at such and such a place. Already the work had gone around. And that person I called had been told of the story by the same guy. But anyway, long story short, Rosemary literally got back to life. By the time she got back to life, an ambulance had been dispatched from Marondera to Macheke because the message had been relayed. And she was, when they got there, she was sitting up. They took her to Marondera Hospital because of the report, checked it out, and she lives till today. So now, for me, when we are discussing these sort of things, I would be engaged in there to try and understand how we think and what I experience. This is just one minor event of a lot of things that have happened, which are recorded, witnessed. So, if I have to explain the Bible, the Word, the everything, I take it from a completely different zone. I don't sort of debate the reality or the non-reality of it.
Thank you, Nick.
That's how I can.
Thank you, Nick. I think your response is powerful. Nkosana, you want to respond? Please, let's give a mic to. Okay, Ken, do you? I'm sorry, my brother. I'd love to push you. Be as short as you can, please.
No, I want to challenge because I respect you. What an amazing, awesome mind. What a gift. You really are an intellectual, spiritual child. But I don't want to challenge that scientist thing. I don't want to challenge that politician.
Well, you should.
But I want to challenge the Christian because I know it was once there. I was not born a Christian, but I was also dead on a bed in an ambulance after healing a tree. And had 60% of my brain filled with blood. Hematoma that the doctor said would leave me a 2% chance of recovery, being alive. And if I woke up, I would be a vegetable. But the miracle after 5 days in a coma was I opened my eyes and I began speaking as I'm speaking to you now. So my challenge to you is, let's start with the presupposition that there is a God, that He is in control. Let's also agree that, yes, the country should be run by politicians and a government that allow the people to run themselves, as you put it. As my partner says, allow the people to feed themselves. And also everyone should feel they belong in society. And there should be this equilibrium, this balance of coexistence of opposites, as you put it. Because God Himself allowed those opposites to be created. Because for the presence of good to be there, evil must exist. Without evil existing, there would be no understanding of what is good. So God allows these things to exist in opposition. Absolutely. My question to you and challenge to you is, if we are in the end times, which we Christians believe we are, there are many prophets speaking about them recently in the last few weeks. If the end of time was here, and biblically you know at the end of time the Lord comes back, you will be given a choice. You have to choose. They're told every knee will bow, every tongue will confess. In your heart, it's your choice. And maybe the faith that you have is different to the faith I have. But I know that there's enough faith in you to have a hope to believe in something that you cannot see. And if the Lord was to return today, one, what would be your choice? And two, as a politician, don't you think it's time for people in government to bring God back into government? Because we've seemed to have lost our way in society by God leaving government. And I've seen in South Africa some amazing changes. The chairman of our group, actually, Michael Louis, helped to facilitate the constitutional challenge to the Electoral Act in South Africa that led to the independent candidates being allowed to participate in elections. And today there's a government of national unity. But there's also a big movement in South Africa to bring godly people back into government. What is your position on that?
Thank you. We will allow you to respond and wrap up. Fascinating how the conversation has gone to where it's gone. Absolutely beautiful. Please respond, and then we're going to take a break.
So interesting. No quarrel with either of the positions that have been. And I think we get stuck on labels. When I say a creative force, I'm deliberately trying to get away from saying God, but it's the same thing. Because I don't believe that the rest of the world that is not Christian, Muslims, Buddhists, and so on, are condemned. That I don't believe. And what fascinates me is that everywhere on the earth, everywhere literally, there are very few people I know who claim to be atheists, whatever that means, very few. But everywhere you go on earth, irrespective of level of civilization, people are striving to connect to something that is bigger than them, that they give allegiance to as being responsible for their existence everywhere, including the so-called primitive tribes. So I don't have a problem with I believe in the existence of God, actually, because I'm saying to you, the universe is so complex. And the way the elements of the universe work together in harmony is an impossibility without some creative force. It's not possible. So I don't, for instance, even as a PhD physics, I don't believe in the Big Bang. Or I think a Big Bang, if that's the way it happened, it's simply people are not going beyond what caused it. It could not be just something that happened on its own without a causality. I just don't believe that. Now, going back to Nick's point, I absolutely again agree. You know what's fascinating? Let me answer you slightly differently, or respond, not comment differently. I personally don't believe that geniuses exist, for instance. I absolutely don't, because what is a genius? In our interpretation, we give praise, if you like, the accolades to an individual when we say they are a genius. My view, my take as of now, is that there is a force above, an intelligence above us. And for reasons that I cannot tell you, that intelligence chooses from amongst us certain individuals and shows them solutions to certain problems. And those people suddenly do things we absolutely cannot fathom. And we are absolutely wowed and say, so-and-so is a genius. No, they are not a genius. They are chosen and they were shown how to solve a particular issue. And it is fascinating for me that up to today, with all the advances in technology, we still cannot figure out how the pyramids were built. Up to today, with all the technology we've got, we cannot figure out how the pyramids were built. How do we explain that to ourselves? So I agree with both of you. There is absolutely another intelligence. We can argue on labels, but we are failing to then identify the label from the essence. In essence, there is absolutely another intelligence that is responsible for what is there. What we call it is another issue, and it is responsible for the relationships of the elements of the universe as we see them. I don't doubt that 1 minute. Right. But I give license to different people finding their own path to that entity. It's a bit like you and I deciding that we're going to go to Blawayo from here. And then you say, I'm going to go through Gutu, or through Mashingo, through Kadom, whatever. And I choose, for whatever reason, to take a different route. But we've agreed we are going to Blawayo. What it appears to me that humanity has done is that we start haggling about the path, not the destination. We then say, oh, my path is better than yours. Come with me, it's the only way there. But we are missing the point. The key is the destination, not the way I get there. I can choose a different routing to go to Blawayo. You can choose another one. Both are fine.
Thank you so much. Thank you, guys.